John Smith was born January 1580 in Lancashire, England, into a family of substantial farmers. He lived as an actor, as a writer, and as a personality. His grammar school teachers saw potential in him even from a young age, as he loved learning and reading. Although he claimed to have made his own fate, John Smith depended on the patronage of noblemen and women. In December 1606, Smith joined fellow countrymen on a voyage to the New World.
Although there is controversy as to when the voyage set sail from England, John Smith recorded that they set sail on December 19, 1606.
In Brantley Henderson's fabulous John Smith, he describes the arrival as, quote, on April 26, 1607, a violent storm drove 3 little ships, the Discovery, Godspeed, and Susan Constant, into the mouth of what is now known as the Chesapeake Bay.
The voyage is supposed to take 2.5 to 3 months, but they ended up taking 4.5 months because of those 6 weeks in the English Channel. They had hit storms and contrary winds, so they had to just anchor down and wait. We don't know a lot about what actually happens on the ships, just because they didn't write it down. It's kind of the same way we write in our diaries about a trip. We write about where we stop and cool things we did. We don't really write about who's sitting where in the car.
The voyage over was not free of problems, however. They actually captured John Smith on the voyage over and created gallows with aim to hang him. So when he arrived in Jamestown, he was actually a prisoner to those who captured him until he was set free with the help of Captain Bartholomew Gosnold.
John Smith was a captain in the army for the English for a considerable time of his life. He wasn't a sailor in the time period, but he was pretty adept by the time he publishes a book called Sea Grammar, which is a pretty good case study about what sailing in the 1600s was like. In that book, he tells us a lot about what the lines do, several of the knots that you might use as a sailor, as well as how a sailor might get paid.
The 22 day of April, Captain Newport and myself, with divers others, to sum of 22 persons, set forward to discover the river, some 50 or 60 miles, finding it in some places broader and in some narrower. The country, for the most part, on each side plain high ground, with many fresh springs. The people in all places kindly entreating us, dancing and feasting us with strawberries, mulberries, bread, fish, and other of their country provisions, whereof we had plenty, for which Captain Newport kindly requited their least favors with bells, pins, needles, beads, and glasses, which so contented them that his liberality made them follow us from place to place in effort to kindly repay us.
The Powhatans are a confederacy of Native American Indians who spoke similar dialect in the Chesapeake.
During his time in the New World, John Smith kept records of his travels and discoveries. There were 3 volumes total. In the first volume, he describes being captured by the Powhatan Indians when he was out canoeing one day. He was captured by an Indian hunting party under open canoe and taken to a temporary lodge. Several days later, on December 30th, Smith was taken before the Powhatan and was released on January 2nd.
During his time in captivity of the Powhatan Indians, Captain John Smith built relationships with the Indians, and these relationships turned into him gaining vital information to learn how to live off the land in Jamestown.
Smith finds the Powhatan brave, capable of great endurance, simple, but shrewd and cunning and treacherous, an inferior people who are apt to prove themselves when brought into contact with the superior.
In the speech by the Powhatan, recorded by John Smith in 1609, he says, "Why will you obtain by force what you may obtain by love? Why will you destroy us who supply you with food? What can you get by war? We are unarmed and willing to give you what you ask if you come in a friendly manner. I am not so simple as to know it is better to eat good meat, sleep comfortably, live quietly with my wife and children, laugh and be merry with the English, and, being a friend, trade for their copper and hatchets than to run away from them. Take away your guns and swords, the cause of all our jealousy, or you may die in the same manner. Had John Smith not discovered Jamestown, it would not have been Virginia's capital from 1619 to 1698.
John Smith was an interesting fellow. There's a lot of misconceptions. The whole thing with the gentleman, and the gentlemen were not working. John Smith wrote a letter back to England. In this letter, he says, "He who shall not work shall not eat." We've all heard that. Further on in the same letter, he says, "I would rather have one gentleman than 10 of these workers." John Smith was very upfront in his thoughts.
When John Smith was captured by the Powhatan Indians, Pocahontas threw herself on him. John Smith thought that this was her saving his life, but historians believe that it was an act of adoption into the Powhatan culture.
Although Disney portrays a romance between Pocahontas and John Smith, she was only 10 at the time of their meeting and later married John Rolfe. Although John Smith played an influential role in the establishment of Jamestown, not everyone admired him or respected his leadership.
He was very authoritative, my way or the highway, which is not the way to get the most work out of folks that are of the gentlemanly kind of class. You got to kind of convince them, make them think it was their idea. He wasn't really good at that.
After Captain John Smith was severely burned, he was forced to be sent home on October 4th. He did not arrive back home in England until November 30th. After looking at what has happened after his time that he left Jamestown, you can see that the death rates had increased.
While John Smith was here in Jamestown, he wanted to have all the settlers spread out. That way they wouldn't catch diseases. Unfortunately though, when John Smith left Jamestown, all the settlers came back in and lived closely together. This made it a thriving place for diseases, and unfortunately the death rates rose in this area. Also during this time was the survival time, and during this all the settlers began to steal things from the Indians and would do whatever they could, even cannibalism, to stay alive. Unfortunately, this brought Jamestown almost to its end.
After John Smith departs from Jamestown in 1609, he will not return. The gentleman did not ask him to return. After he departed and Lord Delaware was named the new governor of Virginia. He would, however, return to the New World in 1614. While sailing along the coasts of Maine and New England on a fishing trip, he found the maps that had been created to be fairly inaccurate, so he took the opportunity to create a new map of New England, which is said to be fairly accurate for maps in that time period.
Today we are standing on the exact spot where Pocahontas and John Rolfe got married in 1614. 2 years later, in 1616, John Rolfe, Pocahontas, and their son, Thomas Rolfe, traveled all the way to England after not hearing back from Captain John Smith, expecting that he had been killed or that something had happened to him. Unfortunately, while there, Pocahontas captured a virus and in 1617 passed away.
At the age of 51, John Smith died on June 21, 1631 in London. Although he only spent a short time in Jamestown, the settlement most likely could not have survived without him and his leadership skill.
He was human. He had his good points, he had his bad points, he had his foibles. At the time when he was here, 1608, 1609, his very authoritative my way or the highway leadership style is what was needed here.
John Smith's short time in Jamestown has earned him a long time of remembrance in American history. His directing of the gentleman, his jurisdiction that every gentleman must work to eat, and his effort to build relationships with the Powhatan Indians are what he will be remembered for. Although his style of leadership provoked controversy at times, John Smith is undoubtedly an important figure in the establishment of Jamestown and the settling of the New World.